The next tip I want to give you as a speaker or as somebody wanting to learn to speak is get comfortable with hearing your voice in front of an audience. This can sometimes be a little bit nerve-wracking when somebody first starts to speak. I remember I had a friend of mine who has a booming voice, and he started to join me when I was speaking to different audiences around the United Kingdom, and he would often go up and not want to put his microphone on. Now that's fine actually, because his voice had the ability to carry out to the audience. However, the challenges with this is that when you're starting to speak to an audience and you're not using a microphone, for example, there are certain subtleties that you may or may not even pick up while I'm speaking here in my voice because I'm not using a microphone. But if I were using a microphone, I could drop my voice, I could whisper to you in a slightly different way, I could use my voice in a way which could move you in my tonality, and that's very powerful when you're wearing a microphone. Now some people get uncomfortable with this. They actually get nervous because they stand in front of their audience and they start to hear their voice coming through a speaker, and they start to drop their voice. They actually speak quieter. So I want you to get used to hearing your voice. How can you do this? Well, one of the first things to do is start to speak out loud, for example, when you're driving along. If you drive and you're going along the motorway or driving along the highway for 15-20 minutes, start to practice what you want to say to your audience. Speak it out loud. Learn to project your voice. This is very, very important. If you get an opportunity and you're in an empty room, stand there and learn to project your voice out. Got a good friend of mine that comes again and supports me sometimes when I'm speaking. And one of the challenges that he has is that when he gets in front of his audience and he starts to speak, he initially opens to his audience with a nice booming message. So he'll say, "Greetings everybody, it's great to see you all here. Are you having lots of fun?" And they'll say yes, and then very quickly his physiology and his tonality shift down and his voice moves down to here, or sometimes it sits just here and it isn't as strong because he's not comfortable necessarily with hearing his own voice, but also he gets into a comfortable zone where he's delivering at a much lower energy level. So the more you get used to hearing your own voice, the more you get used to projecting your own voice, like I'm having to do here. For example, I've got snow here which is absorbing the sound. I've got a distance between myself and the camera, and I'm not using a microphone. So I have to throw my voice out to you, the audience, who are sitting at home watching this or sitting on your laptop watching it, and I have to imagine that my voice is carrying through. You've got to get comfortable with this. This is singly one of the first mistakes that people make when they're learning to speak. So remember, if you're speaking to a group of 10 people in front of you and they're within a small space, then your voice projection can be different. If you're having to project out to a group of 100 people and they're spread out across a room and there's lots of cloth around the room, for example drapes, then and a carpet on the floor, that will absorb your voice. So again, as I say, get used to hearing your voice, get comfortable with it. And another great tip on this is when you get into an empty room is to start to move around the front of the room as if you were delivering your message and throw your voice out to different areas of the room. And if you can, get a microphone, get one of these dictaphones. Something that I use is called an Edirol, I think it's Edirol. If you look up Edirol recording device online, that's something that I use for recording with. It's a great tool. You can stick it down, you can project your voice and put the microphone out as though it's in the audience and actually speak to the audience as though, if it is an audience, great, but if it's not an audience, practice as though the audience are there and then listen to the recording back. Even better, get 2 or 3 people into a room with you and start to practice projecting your voice. And don't just put them in one location. Again, a simple mistake people make is they say to a friend, "Could you come and have a listen to me?" And they say, "Yep, sure." They sit them right down there and they start to speak to them right in front of them 3 or 4 feet away. That's not going to be helpful. You need to have people sat ideally in a few different spots around the room and make it the same size room that you're actually practicing a presentation in, so that they can actually pick up on the subtleties of your message. And ask them to look at 3 things. Number 1, they want to look at your physiology, and we'll come back to this in another session, how you are physically. Number 2, ask them to listen to the tonality. In other words, the voice, how you're using your voice, the tonality of your voice. Here, I'm having to stay in quite a high range because I'm projecting out in the snow. In a room, you can have more subtlety. And the third thing is to look at your energy and the message that you're delivering. And we'll come back to that a little bit later on. So, remember this message. Get comfortable with hearing your voice and start to practice using your voice in different environments, even in the shower, even in your front room, even in your bedroom, even in front of your partner who you love. Just practice different things. And what you'll find is, people say this to me when they learn to speak, is that after a while they find themselves actually saying things with a much more stronger projection. In fact, I was helping a friend of mine just recently who was learning to speak, and he was telling me that he found himself talking to his wife and projecting his voice out. But that's great, because he's learning to get comfortable with hearing his voice go beyond this small range that most people are used to on a day-to-day basis. So that's the tip for you. Get used to hearing your own voice and practice throwing it out there.